I've made videos on some great, neglected icebergs that are out there. This one is pretty neat. You've probably seen videos covering UFOs and related phenomena many times before. This one covers some very strange aircraft and other hovering and floating vehicles that have been conceived of or tested in the past. I hope you enjoy it. You'll be able to find a link to the original iceberg in the video description. For those that don't know, icebergs are internet charts dedicated to a certain topic. They stick to this format. Each tier or layer on this iceberg covers increasingly more obscure entries and topics as we go down further. I'll be starting at the first tier. Let's go. WFD Flyboard. The acronym WFD stands for Water Flight Device, and that name is fairly self-explanatory. This device kick-started an accompanying water sport when it came out in 2011. It ran around $5,000 when it came out and became a popular attraction in many resort locations. The version of it I'll be covering is this one belonging to Frankie Zapata, a French inventor and watercraft pilot. Zapata claimed his device, a small board powered by four 250 horsepower jet engines, could reach a height of some 10,000 feet. He broke the Guinness World Record for longest distance traveled by a hoverboard in a single flight in 2016 when he took the device and flew for around 1.5 miles. He controlled its power using a handheld remote and had to physically turn to steer the board. TR-3B. This aviation myth is a triangular black craft that has been rumored to have been tested by the US government sometime in the early 2000s. This craft is said to have been powered by an anti-gravity drive, reverse engineered from a crashed alien spaceship. These claims grew in 2020 when the US Navy filed a patent for an inertial mass reduction device, which made some claim that the US was finally setting to reveal anti-gravity technology. Others state that the TR-3B is the reason for multiple alleged sightings of triangular black spacecraft over the past 30 years. Avro Canada VZ-9AV Avrocar. This was a Canadian project to build an early vertical takeoff and landing fighter-bomber. Avro's concept was powered by circular turbo rotors that produced thrust. This downward thrust made a cushion of air below the craft, allowing it to float, and could be directed to the rear of the craft to allow it to accelerate in a certain direction. Canada dropped the project in 1952 due to the high cost of the project, but the US took it over in 1958, and the company produced 2 working prototypes. The project was canceled in late 1961, after it was found that it had a max speed of 35 miles an hour and was very unstable in the air. Hoverbike. Multiple companies are working to produce these, with one of the most prominent being this one, called the XTurismo. It was designed to fly fairly close to Earth, and when it was revealed at the 2022 Detroit Auto Show, was claimed to weigh around 661 pounds, and could fly for around 40 minutes at a time, with a max speed of 62 miles per hour. It would have cost around, according to the manufacturer's estimate, about $770,000 per unit, and would have required a pilot's license from many countries, with the exception of Japan. It did work pretty well in demonstrations, and garnered a significant amount of media coverage. However, the company went bankrupt in January 2024, leaving the future of the XTurismo a question. Hypersonic Technology Vehicle 2. Developed by DARPA, the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, This program tested an unmanned glider called the Falcon Hypersonic Technology Vehicle 2, or Falcon HTV-2 for short. It was filled with sensor equipment and then launched in 2010. It flew for only 9 minutes, but hit Mach 22, which is 16,700 miles per hour. The craft was planned to fly for around 30 minutes, but the glider's protective skin disintegrated, the craft rolled, and the computer within the Falcon sent the craft in a controlled descent into the ocean. The craft was used for further study of the construction of a hypersonic bomber. Lenticular Aerodyne. This refers more to an effect than an actual aircraft, so I'll keep it quick. Coanda was a Canadian scientist who discovered that air would conform to the curvature of a concave disc, allowing a disc-shaped craft to float on a cushion of air. The lenticular aerodyne was a design of Coanda's that went on to initiate the Avro project, mentioned a little while ago. Horton Parabel. This delta wing, also called the Horton Flying Wing, was a small sailplane that was constructed by the German scientists, the Horton brothers, in 1938. Flying wings are tailless aircraft, with the entirety of the body fitted into the wing as a whole. An example of this design would be the B-2 stealth bomber. The Parabel was an early prototype of one of these aircraft. If you've ever seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, the German plane at the end of the film is based off of these World War II prototypes. Gluhareff MEG. This refers to a series of freaky-looking contraptions that led to the development of the modern light helicopter. The MEG 1X was a personal rig that had a single rotor and an engine attached onto a backpack. The 2X was a similar rig that used 2 blades on its rotor, and the 3X, which in my opinion is both the most cursed and sci-fi looking one out of the group, was completely different. This one had a platform in which the pilot would stand and a 2-bladed rotor that would revolve beneath the platform. As you can see in the images, only the first 2 designs exited the conceptual stage. Moller's Flying Saucers. This entry refers to the M200G Volanta, a prototype flying saucer that floated about 10 feet off the ground and hit top speeds of 50 miles an hour, while boasting a maximum flight time of 90 minutes. Nothing has come of this project since 2007. Couzinet's Aerodyne. This craft was designed by the French aeronautical engineer René Couzinet in 1952. It featured 2 rotating crowns composed of 96 small wings that rotated around the motionless central cockpit. It used 6 180 horsepower engines to float, and possessed a jet engine to allow it to travel horizontally. The French government refused to back the production of the craft, with this proposed flying saucer only existing as a 3/5 scale model and never entering completion. Terrafugia Transition. This flying car was powered by a single piston engine and had capacity for 2 people. The engine of the Transition was a hybrid design that could work with either gasoline or aviation fuel, and allowed it to fly at a max speed of 100 miles an hour. The Transition's manufacturers claimed it had an autopilot mode. It possessed folding wings and a twin tail, allowing it to fit in a standard-sized garage. The design was unveiled in 2006, and the company quickly drew in some interested customers. The craft successfully completed its first test flight in 2012, and the company reportedly received well over 100 reservations for the vehicle. In 2017, the company stated that delivery would begin in 2020. The events of the pandemic delayed this timeline, as you might imagine. The company's vehicle received an airworthiness certification in 2021 and was bought out by a Chinese car company called Geely the next month. The operations were moved to China, and the company laid off many employees, making the future of the program an uncertainty. Solar impulse. This concept began to be put into a design in 2003. The aircraft uses the stored energy generated by more than 11,000 solar cells to spin the 4 propellers along its structure. The craft was made and flown for 26 hours straight across the US in 2010 by a test pilot named Marcus Scherde. Its power use was so efficient that the solar energy was capable of sustaining the craft throughout the night. Tesla's UFO. Nikola Tesla said the following in response to a question about one of his designs. "You should not at all be surprised if someday you see me fly from New York to Colorado Springs in a contrivance which will resemble a gas stove and weigh almost as much." Tesla filed the following patent in 1928, a patent which ended up being the last one he would ever submit. This VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing craft, had a tilt rotor to gain air and a massive propeller to allow the craft to traverse horizontally. The media of the time called it a helicopter plane. Tesla is said to have filed a patent that resembled the popular depiction of a flying saucer, but I couldn't find any solid sources to confirm the details of that story. Shauberger's UFO. Information on this entry was equally sparse. Viktor
with a K. Cool. Viktor with a K.
Shauberger was a German engineer during World War II who supposedly began research into a craft utilizing anti-gravity. There's a myth that he made a small flying saucer in his Vienna workshop in 1941, but the device was irrevocably damaged after a disastrous test flight. The story says that Shauberger was picked up by the German military and forced to work on an experimental device using anti-gravity called the Repulsine, which was captured by the Allies and used to further research into anti-gravity technology. The Flying Pancake. The Vought V173 was a proof-of-concept vehicle developed by the U.S. Navy towards the end of World War I. It was used by the Vought Corporation to test the ideas of Charles Zimmerman, who believed that a low aspect ratio wing would allow an aircraft to travel at very slow speeds, great for an aircraft that needed little space to take off in the confines of an aircraft carrier. It had wooden prop rotors powered by twin 80-horsepower engines. It was flown for over 139 hours during its tests and could be handled well by experienced pilots. It could reach a state of near hovering and didn't cause any serious damage to the pilot during forced landings. The Navy loved the project and asked for the construction of a jet-powered version called the Vought XF-5U-1. This newer plane was pretty much the same externally and earned the name Flying Flapjack. The V-173 survived and can be seen today at the Commemorative Air Force Base in Dallas. Otis T. Carr. Otis T. Carr was an entrepreneur who founded OTC Enterprises in the mid-1950s. He was on a mission to develop, in his own words, a fourth-dimensional space vehicle powered by a revolutionary ultron-electric accumulator. His plan was to undergo test flights of this vehicle in 1959 and hopefully achieve spaceflight by the end of 1960. His project drew investors and UFO enthusiasts. The day of the test flight arrived on April 19th, 1959. Carr fell sick that day, unfortunately for the crowd gathered near the OTC hangar in Oklahoma City, and the flight was canceled. Carr's project never came into being, and he served time for selling stock illegally. Sokol's UFO. Mark Sokol founded the company Falcon Space in New Jersey in the late 2010s. This company was founded with the express purpose of developing the world's first anti-gravity aircraft. Another project the team wanted to complete was the warp drive detector, a device that could tell if a warping of space-time was occurring in a given area. Many of the members of Falcon Space were UFO enthusiasts and desired to take alien tech and reverse engineer it to help with their construction process. Sokol has also come out saying that he fully believes that an extraterrestrial god exists and is in fact the historical God of the Bible. The project has been ongoing, with the most publicized recent event in Falcon Space's story occurring in October 2023. FBI agents, according to Sokol, showed up at his shop after being told that enriched uranium was present at the site. He went on to say that the two agents looked around, found nothing in the site of interest, expressed interest in his work, and then left him alone. Aurora. The SR-91 Aurora is a hypothetical vehicle that is said to have operated in the 1980s and 90s. The stories state that this craft was a successor to the SR-71 Blackbird that could hit speeds of up to Mach 5. The name originated from a 1985 Pentagon budget request, which a person requested funds for the U-2 Dragon Lady, SR-71, and a craft in the same reconnaissance category, called the Aurora. The other half of the story surrounds the date, March 6, 1990. This was the day in which the SR-71 was retired to save money. The media was told that the retirement was due to the emergence of more sophisticated spy satellites. The Air Force raised no opposition to the request from the government to retire the craft, leading some to say that the sudden departure of the SR-71 was due to money being used to develop a new high-tech spy plane. Some claimed that multiple billions of dollars that mysteriously went missing from the Air Force's funds from 1990 to 2006 were used to develop the Aurora. Black Star. If you've seen the film Top Gun Maverick, you might remember an experimental plane from the movie's opening that had this name. However, this plane isn't the exact one that's seen in the movie. The story surrounding this craft began with an article from March 2006 that was posted in the magazines Aviation Weekly and Space Technology. They claimed that the U.S. government in the 1990s built a reusable manned aircraft that could reach orbit using a two-stage rocket system, and went on to claim that the Black Star flew multiple missions in orbit and in suborbit. This project also led some to speculate that it was the reason the SR-71 was retired. If these reports are true, the U.S. achieved this type of hypersonic spaceflight with an aircraft far before anyone else. No moving part aircraft. A lot of aircraft have used propellers, turbine blades, or fans to propel themselves. In 2018, a group of MIT engineers constructed and flew a plane with no moving parts. The light aircraft used ionic wind instead. The idea behind it is a principle that winds can be generated when a current of electricity passes between a thin and thick electrode. The plane generated ions and used them to generate thrust to achieve flight. Superconducting aircraft. While the no moving part aircraft is a reality, the idea of this plane is still being worked out. A superconducting electric motor takes power from jet fuel melting inside of the plane's tank. This energy could in turn be used to make a hybrid plane that uses the electric motor to take off and hit altitude, and then the conventional engine to sustain flight. Williams X-Jet. I saw this design early on while looking into this iceberg and thought it looked amusing. I even considered putting it in the video thumbnail. Williams International was a company that was renowned for its small turbofan engines by the early 1980s. The company began production of personal VTOL aircraft in the 1970s. Their mission was to make a small recon craft for the U.S. Army. It was a tall order, as the Army wanted an aircraft that was a VTOL and was easy to use with minimal training. Piloting a VTOL is difficult to learn, but Williams pursued the project nonetheless. Their work resulted in the X-Jet, which underwent its first successful flight in 1982. The X-Jet was controlled by a set of handlebars that guided direction and speed. The craft was pretty impressive for the era, having an average flight time of around 30 minutes due to its small size and thirsty engine. The project was scrapped, but the X-Jet inspired many to develop their own small personal aircraft. B-2 Spirit. This is about as much as I'm going to talk about this one, as it is far more well known than many of the other things on this iceberg. Convair Model 49. The U.S. was in a conundrum. The Vietnam War was well underway. An existing aircraft, like the F-105 Thunder Chief, were not working well in providing support for ground troops. As a result, Convair was tapped to develop a concept that could help the war effort. They responded by making a transformer. The Model 49 had two side turrets that could hold 7.62mm machine guns or 40mm grenade launchers. It could hold either 12,000 rounds of machine gun ammunition or 500 40mm grenades. It featured a central turret that had space for a rocket launcher or a 30mm cannon. It also had turbine jets to provide lift and propulsion like a traditional helicopter. It had an additional mode that allowed it to assume the shape of a more traditional jet. The proposed design had heavy armor like a tank and little roller wheels, making it more of a flying firebase than armored assault vehicle. The government rejected the design for bizarre reasons like it's vulnerable to enemy attack when it's transforming, or its jet engines and turbines are incredibly loud, and its pilots need specialized training. The craft was passed over, and the government eventually settled on the concept for the Apache attack helicopter. In some alternate universe, these Zaku-looking craft were used by the US to fight in Vietnam. Viktor Grebennikov, Antigravity Levitation. Viktor
with a K. Cool. Victor with a K.
Grebennikov was known as a talented scientist who dedicated his life to the study of insects. He made a controversial claim in 1988 when he said that the chitin and the exoskeletons of some insects allowed them to harness anti-gravity. He then, supposedly, made an anti-gravity craft that he used in the years 1991 through 1992. He also claimed the gravitational effect distorted the area around the craft, allowing it to become partially invisible or very difficult to see. He claimed that the aircraft would achieve speeds of up to 15 miles an hour. He passed away in 2001. Project PV-704. The PV-704, the PV stood for Private Venture, was another prototype made by Avro in 1956. It was a flying saucer-like craft that was powered by the Viper engine. The engine was tested in 1958, but the 704 never entered production. Classified Antigravity Aerospace Craft. This entry refers to a patent filed in 2016 by the Department of the Navy. The patent filed for a craft that used an inertial mass reduction device, antigravity, which the authors called repulsive gravity. The aircraft also used non-conventional propulsion, meaning it used something other than a traditional combustion engine. This has led some to speculate that it used electromagnetic field propulsion instead. The discopter. This concept, the first modern patent for a flying saucer, was created by the Dutch sculptor and painter Alexander Weygers. His craft was a reinvention of the helicopter, using a central rotor enclosed within a tunnel in the frisbee-shaped craft. Weygers, being an artist, drew elaborate drawings, imagining what his discopter could accomplish. He imagined them serving as cruise ships in the sky, and submitted these photos with his 1944 filing. EKIP. Lev Shukin was a USSR scientist who worked on a variety of projects during his career, working on the massive N-1 rocket and several other space-age Soviet programs. He was shifted by the government to start work on hovercrafts after America landed on the moon. In 1979, he was given permission to form his own team to begin work on his very own project. The EKIP, which was an acronym for Ecology and Progress, was designed to be an environmentally friendly flying wing. Flying wings were difficult to control, so the team built a computer system to allow it to be easier to fly. The EKIP also had a mechanism that spit air out of the back of the plane, allowing it to use a cushion of air to descend, like a hovercraft. It used a jet engine that took hydrogen, natural gas, and traditional aviation fuel. Another proposed part of the design was a set of turbofans with heavy noise reduction features. A prototype featuring a few of these technologies was tested, but crashed into a pile of snow during a test run in 1990. The project was canceled, and Shukin took his ideas elsewhere. He started his own firm, and soon ran promo reels that invited Western investment into the EKIP. Over 255 investors, many from the U.S., expressed interest, and the U.S. Navy even partnered with the EKIP firm. The partnership concluded in 2005, and the EKIP was forgotten. Astro V Dynafan. This vehicle was created by a firm based out of Texas in 1962. The Dynafan was shaped like an umbrella and featured a pilot seat attached to the wing, under an impeller. The impeller sucked air in and pushed it over the exterior of the craft, allowing it to achieve lift. The firm tried to sell this craft to the U.S. Navy, and had plans to make a massive version of the plane that functioned as a flying crane. The firm failed to accomplish its lofty goals, and was absorbed by another corporation in 1965. Garrett STAMP. This craft is pretty neat looking. Garrett Research started development of the STAMP, which stood for Small Tactical Aerial Mobility Platform, in the early 1970s. The VTOL vehicle was made on a contract from the U.S. government that paid Garrett $500,000, which is not a lot by military aircraft research standards. The craft generated half a ton of thrust, thanks to air being sucked through the rear of the engine and blasted through a large fan. It weighed 670 pounds and was 8 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 6 feet tall, making it unusually compact. The design, according to some, was intended to serve as a flying jeep, but it only had a range of 30 miles and a max speed of 75 miles an hour in its early stage. Prototypes were made, but the project was canceled. The true purpose of these vehicles is still unknown, though it is thought they could be used as utility vehicles, or a handy way to place foot soldiers into a hard-to-reach area. Origami Spacecraft. This refers to a design style that some believe could be crucial in space travel. Origami, the art of paper folding, has been used by NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Origami done right takes a material and packs it into the tightest space possible. The idea is that this art could be used to take large structures and efficiently pack them into rockets. The Starshade, a NASA exoplanet exploration program design, uses this idea. It's a special cover that unfolds like the petals of a flower to shelter a telescope from starlight, allowing it to take more defined photos of distant exoplanets. Antiproton Spacecraft. This idea is also called the antimatter spacecraft. This concept would take an engine powered by converting antimatter into energy, harnessing massive amounts of power and allowing humanity to achieve great speeds with their craft. It's estimated that 1/1,000,000th of a gram of antimatter could supply a spacecraft's journey to Mars. Magnetic Monopole Spacecraft. This design was submitted by John Q. St. Clair. The magnetic monopole spacecraft, according to St. Clair, was a system that generates a field of wormholes, which are threaded with a magnetic field. The spacecraft's north field is attracted to the south wormhole, providing lift on the hull. The craft's hull was made out of aluminum. No prototype was ever made. Electric Dipole Spacecraft. This concept would use a propulsion system powered by plasma. Project Daedalus. This entry captured my attention when I saw this image, which compared Daedalus to a Saturn V rocket in scale. This study was run by the British between 1973 and 1977. The scientists picked a destination, a place called Bernard's Star, located 5.9 light-years away from the Sun, a planet orbited within the system. The goal was to make a craft that used technologies of the era, that could reach Bernard's Star in 50 years or less, and would be reusable for other missions to distant systems. The team chose to develop a nuclear pulse rocket to attain the required speed. Daedalus would be built in Earth's orbit and would have 50,000 tons of fuel and 500 tons of scientific equipment. The first stage of the rocket would last for 2 years, allowing the craft to hit a fragment of the speed of light. The second stage would fire for almost 2 years to further speed up the craft, and the remaining 46 would see the spacecraft continue on its way. The Daedalus would continue past its target as they had no way of stopping or decelerating it. Telescopes mounted into the structure would monitor the system, and probes would be launched to investigate. The plan was for repairs to be made by robots. Alright, that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing, or check out the links in the description to support me further. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.